I would like to request people sitting in the back to please come and sit in the front. Center थोड़ा सा. Sir, can we start? All right. Hello and welcome everyone to Vañgmay, an evening with Marathi Literatures. Amongst us, we have Professor Prashant Bagar from HSS. He's an acclaimed Marathi author. We have a guest amongst us, Professor Ashutosh Poddar from Flame University, Pune, who's also an acclaimed playwright and writer in Marathi and English as well. And we have Professor Chinmay Dharurkar, also one of our colleagues from HSS department. And I would welcome you all to the evening, and I'll invite Professor Kantish Bilani to give us the welcome note.
Thank you, Professor Verma. A very warm evening to everyone. And at the start, I thank Professor Karandekar for his time. Also, Professor Ashutosh, Professor Prashant, and Professor Chinmay for being the highlight of today's evening. So, शिवानी केंद्र और राजभाषा प्रकोष्ठ की तरफ से आप सबका एक बार और स्वागत है. I was just thinking one thing. So maybe, when we start, I say we say a lot. And on Marathi mein, when we say I, it means mother. So that brings the similarity between what I is and what mother is. I think with this small note, I think it's very nice to have a linkage with Marathi like this. So I will not take much of your time. I think we can take the evening forward. So I'll now request Professor Abhay Karandekar to come forward and give his welcome remarks. And we have a small memento for him to please get the evening started. So, yes. Please, we can. So, Professor Karandekar.
Okay, thank you very much for coming together for this evening. First of all, on behalf of IIT Kanpur and on my own personal behalf, I would like to welcome Professor Poddar, who has come all the way from Pune amongst us. And of course, hearty congratulations to my colleague, Professor Prashant Bagar, whom we will felicitate today. And also another colleague who will be speaking, Professor Chinmay, who has joined recently as a faculty in our humanities and social sciences. And I believe he knows some more than 15 languages. So we will see his skills. So thank you very much. And I'm indeed delighted that Shivani Center for the Nurture and Reintegration of Hindi and other Indian languages, so that other Indian language part, we have held several functions for Hindi. But I'm indeed delighted today that we are now holding one for that other Indian language part, and that happens to be Marathi, which is, my mother tongue. So thank you very much for organizing this, and we look forward to an exciting evening. So without much ado, I think we can really start today's function. So thank you.
So I'll invite Professor Ashutosh Poddar to get to the stage, and I'll request Professor Karandekar to honor him by giving him the mementos.
Shivani Center,
Please have a seat. I'll request and I'll invite Professor Chinmay Dharukar to come on the stage, and I'll request Professor Karandikar to honor him by giving him a memento. And finally, I would like to invite Professor Prashant Bagar to come on the stage. And I'll request Professor Karandikar to felicitate him, giving him the memento. And we have a small token of appreciation for him from the Shivani Center as well. I'll request Professor Kantesh to join Professor Karandikar in felicitating. Yeah, please. Sorry. Sonu. Thank you, Professor Karandikar. Prashant. Yeah, keep it. Yeah. I'll now invite Professor Sushrut Ravish from Department of HSS to introduce Professor Poddar and introduce his talk.
Good evening, everyone. Professor Poddar is going to be delivering a talk titled Text and Context, Notes on Contemporary Marathi Fiction. Professor Ashutosh Poddar is an award-winning Marathi writer of several one-act and full-length plays, poems, short stories, fiction, and translations. He has 2 collections of plays, a collection of poetry, and an adaptation of a play to his credit. He is the recipient of several awards for his writing, including the Maharashtra government's Ram Ganesh Gadkari Award and Maharashtra Foundation's R.S. Datar Award. Ashutosh has edited a volume of Greatest Marathi Stories Ever Told by Aleph Book Company. Also, he has co-edited a volume of essays on performance making in the archive and an anthology of writing in Marathi published by Rutledge India and Sharjah Art Foundation, respectively. He edits Hakara, a peer-reviewed bilingual journal of creative expression published online in Marathi and English. Currently, he's working as an associate professor of literature and theater and performance studies at Flame University, Pune. Over to you, Professor Poddar.
Because I have to speak for 45 minutes. As the program says. So the stand is dated. Or if I'm audible, I can talk. No, you can use the column mic. Am I audible? Yes. Yeah. Honorable Director, sir, members of Shivani Center, distinguished faculty members, it's fascinating to see that we are celebrating Marathi literary tradition miles away from Maharashtra. Of course, Bithur, Nanasaheb Peshwa's place, is just a few kilometers from here. I read that Hardekar, Moge, Sapre, Shedvalkar and Pinge still live there. So yes, I'm honored to be here. There is also special something today that my contemporary writer friend, Prashant, is being felicitated. It's lovely and adorable that all of you have come together to express your affection for this soft-spoken Prashant, who lives in the world of words, language, fiction and philosophy. So I congratulate you all, his colleagues, Prachi, Nissim, he's not here, and his readers for supporting him in his writerly dreams and realizations and successes and failures. What does the fiction do? I'm asked to talk about. What does the fiction do? Besides several other things, in the context of today's discussion, I propose that it opens up infinite possibilities of space and time. Reading fictional work in a novel has always been intriguing to me. As a playwright, what fascinates me in a novel is the character of space and time it may have. Space and time capture not only a writer's but reader's imagination. Unlike dramatic space that is by and large determined by the state directions and its a realization within a designated space, what you call proscenium space or open space. A space in a novel opens up innumerable possibilities that are inherent in a narrative as in storytelling. Thus, a novel is situated in a certain time, situated within a certain period and space, even if it's virtual. It has time and space of the text and context within the text and context outside the text. The time and space is not merely physical, but non-physical and emotional too. The imagination of a writer transposes it in the reader's time, whichever it may be. Of course, it's not the qualifying feature of a novel to transpose it to the reader's time, because there could be possibilities of dissociation from a reader within a novel. Now, what is significant here for me is that how fiction does it. And for me, the how-ness of a fiction is very important. For me, I believe that fiction will depend on this how-ness, meaning how the relationship between what happens and its situation in time and space is mediated. How does one mediate space and time within a novel? So I think that this mediation happens at two levels. One, the means by which any plot deforms or decodes any particular story will depend on not only on the formal features in a given text, and two, by generally held conception of how time and space relate to each other in a particular culture at a particular time. These are two aspects. For instance, novel by Prashant Bhagwat is a chronicle of the hostel life of multiple characters. In a scene in this novel, there, meaning student's professor enters the hostel room, and you know, when a professor enters the hostel room, what happens? I mean, you can imagine. The space, what he calls adhantar, which is a kind of hanging nowhere space, adhantar, antaral, adhantar, hanging nowhere space, with the entry of the professor moves and wobbles with the arrival of this professor within the hostel room. I quote from novel in Marathi, so we also celebrate Marathi. प्राध्यापक अमृतकर येतात तेव्हा खोलीत तिघ चौघ असतात. बोलत बसलेले असतात. खोलीत एका कोपऱ्यात भरपूर कपडे सामूहिक ठेवलेले असतात. दिवस उघडाबंब असतो म्हणून तो भांबावून जातो. कारण किंवा निमित्त काही असेल, पण त्याच्या येण्याने त्याचं अधांतर हलतं, डगमगतं. Now, what amuses me about fiction, about novel, is that a novel doesn't have its own marker for identification. What I mean as a playwright, I feel that play has dialogue arranged in a certain manner, certain ways, or it has state direction, as you know. But a novel doesn't have all those markers in a place. That way, novel is very open in a form. That way, anything can be a novel. Anything can be a novel, but anything can't be a novel. Anything can't be a drama or a play. The novel has nothing but a narration. Fictional world in a novel is realized through story, narration, and language. There is interconnectedness. So if a writer builds this interconnectedness in a meaningful fictional world, that becomes a reality within a novel. In the process, the story and form dynamic emerges. Flaubert, the great French writer, in a reply to one of the correspondents has written, I quote Flaubert, "You say that I pay too much attention to form? Alas, it is like body and soul, form and content to me are one," unquote. Thus, a novel is a narration of an event or events structured within a certain fictional space and time that is an embodiment of form, a certain form, a particular form. This can be applicable not for novel, I mean any other form, but in a novel, it happens with a depth and breadth. I call it curation of time and space. The curation of time and space happens in a novel. Needless to say, time and space involve layered understanding of society, culture, and tradition. Now, what has happened in Marathi novel, Marathi literary tradition? Now, as you know, across all Indian forms of literature, it had begun in 19th century, what you call novel. The modern fiction that we read today emerged from the journals and periodicals published during the 19th century print era. It was at this time that the great Marathi poet Keshav Sut established new conventions of poetry, and also Marathi drama flourished through innovations in writing and presentation. Since the novel was a written form of educated class, it was limited to urban, educated, and upper caste communities in Maharashtra in 19th century. And not just today's Maharashtra, it was also expanded to Madhya Pradesh, Gujarat, I mean Bombay Presidency, what you call. The writing was influenced by the newly established colonial education system, reformative movements, existing narrative traditions and forms, exposure to Persian, Arabic, and Western storytelling forms through translations, and the narrative element of wonder, supernaturalism, and morality. But what was at the core? I don't intend to tell you the story and history of Marathi literature, but what was at the core was an urge to bear witness to historic events, share an anecdote, or develop a character sketch through a narrative that was at the heart of then newly literary form of fiction. So what I mean when I say fiction, I also meant short story, not just a novel. Because novel in those days was an extension of short story form. So there was short story first. Men and women started writing short stories in 19th century. Novel appeared in 1857. Appearing in the magazines and the novels and short stories became visible as a modern form. Distinct from the traditionally heard or read fables, parables, and mythologies, Ramayana, Mahabharata, and Bhagavad story. Now there is very interesting shift that has happened in 19th century. one of the critics and short story writers, Vijaya Rajyadeksha, she has made a point that a written form of fiction that emerged in 19th century through short story and then novel, it was full of reformist zeal, played a significant role in transforming story listening audience, story reading audience and story listening audience uh, into the readers by appealing them to listen the story through a story or novel, through a fictional form. Thus, narrative techniques have maintained readers' relationship with the oral form of storytelling through its frontality and remain committed to representing social reality. So, at the core of Marathi fiction in literary culture has been an urge to, this is very important, it has been an urge to respond to social changes in the form of either social awakening or reformist urge. Since the beginning, by and large, it has remained committed to representing contemporary social reality and describing how one should live rather than depicting how one lived. And that is very that's why I call the morality was at the core of fiction in Marathi. The element of wonder in Marathi fiction has taken a backseat because the social realism was at the core of expression of Marathi fiction. So since the beginning, by and large, since wonder took a backseat with the rise of social realism, it has also remained a solid creative impulse even among later generation of writers. Even today you can see social realism or depiction of social reality and social form have been very prominent. This is also reflected in the approach of considering literature as a didactic form. So there are two broad views. One view says that literature is for society and literature is for art's sake. So art for art's sake and art for society, and that is very, very prominent. So on one hand, art for art's sake movement believed or insisted rather, not just believed, insisted on storytelling technique and its a purity as a form. And on the other hand, art for society's sake believed in literature as a tool to reform society. However, both these forms and approaches have failed to represent or present a deeper and more comprehensive view of life and form of expression. Only with B.S. Mardekar in 50s and 60s, Marathi novel or broadly literature enabled the rethinking of relationship between life, values and literature through fiction. In more than one way, this era, which was spearheaded by Mardekar, was a kind of epoch-making consciousness amongst the writers of breaking away from existing conventions. Now, again coming to the core, throughout the journey that I have been sharing with you, Marathi fiction and discourse on it is stuck in linear relationship between text and context, the duality of story and plot, and duality of cause and effect narrative strategy. So whoever writes or whoever talks about Marathi fiction, one always examines, does it have a relationship between cause and effect? So I clap and there is a sound. Does a literature do that? Does a story do that? Does a novel do that? That has been at the core of understanding of fiction in Marathi. Within this duality, content rather than how content would be realized through the plot has been a central concern. So actually, Marathi literature has been more interested in telling the stories that bring change, but they are not interested in how stories could be told, how they could be told in a different kind of formal ways. So so-called good writer is considered valuable because he constructs or she constructs some vague construct called society by responding to the equally vague construct called society. So no one is clear about what society means and what fiction means. The principle of form, or what you call essence of form, is in a novel has been significantly sidelined in Marathi. Whatever understanding of form comes through a writer and critique is through the technique and not through form. Unfortunately, what is not understood in Marathi fiction is that social processes are also linked to the form of novel, and there is a content in a form of novel too. And in mid-20th century, scholars and writers like Kusumavati Deshpande and Pushi Rege have responded to the debates on story and plot and content and form. Scholars like Rege, P.S. Rege, he has pointed out on how the understudy of form of a novel has contributed to inequitable and simplistic categorization. Interestingly, Rege observes, and it's a very interesting observation of Rege, that a critic first conveniently decides upon a category, either it's Dalit novel, either it's feminist novel, either it's whatever, and then gives his ruling on a novel. Here we can recall Russian formalists and their distinction between the way in which an event unfolds as a brute chronology. Some of you might have heard about or read about Fabula and Sujet, where the same event is ordered in a mediated telling of it. The event is there and there is mediated telling. And having a construction in which the chronology might be reversed so as to achieve a particular effect. It implies, and it's very interesting, it implies that events in a complex narrative do not occur in a sequence arranged by chronology, but their order could be recovered, as it were, by rearranging the distorted events within a plot of a novel. Now, how do we understand something as a proper? We understand something as a proper in connection to the real life. Now, real life chronology, which we know is just a perspective of chronology. So how do you understand something is proper in response to the chronology in life? So underlying this idea of separation between story and plot is an old assumption that revealing fundamental discrepancy between literature and life. And the assumption is that in literature, events can be variously arranged following any sequence, whereas in real life, they are always chronological. So we have already decided that real life is chronological, whereas fiction is not chronological. And that's weird, that's very bizarre, because our lives are not chronological. This way the assumption is very limited now. It's a rigid and dogmatic. Marathi literature, barring a few writers and their works, has largely followed this trajectory. It has ignored time and again the fact that we live in different types of realities. A reality is never given, we have forgotten, reality is never given, but it is an outcome of society's culture. Culture is plural and multifaceted. The mainstream understanding of society and literature is based on nourishment of an image of reality that was or is of an actual presence. But in fact, reality is also imagined reality. It's not just about actual presence. A person lives in a certain time and space. When he isn't present, he isn't there. Thus, the reality of, say, Marathi society has been considered as real, stable, absolute, and complete. Obviously, the literature that reveals such reality has largely remained monosyllabic. It revealed a linear and closure-oriented space and temporal trajectory within perfectly closed spatial figurations, predicting a unidirectional, linear, and teleological temporality progressively moving towards completion. And where is the completion? Completion is within life to death. So we have believed that there is no life, before birth, and there is no life after death. And that's also linear. That's very teleological. In this context, Prashant's writing is a hope. Novel and his stories bring forth the layered, multifold relationship to reality and social, and the notions of truth. His work, his writing and novel, for which we are felicitating him, proposes a complex understanding of content and form built on blending the representational form in response to the existential concerns of diverse identities and relationships in contemporary Marathi society. His attempt, it seems to me, is to break away from the conventional storytelling genres that I have described so far, genres of omniscient control over characters, and an old-fashioned representational style of writing fiction. The subjective contemplation, poetic imagery, and complexities of experiences are some of the characteristics of his writing. He offers fresh perspective on the overlapping layers of experiences of an individual. I admire his novel as he brings together time, space, and cultural circumstances and an individual within the imagined world of narration and language. Through the sitting at a corner of literary culture here in Kanpur, his writing represents that minuscule reality within a fictional world, Marathi fictional world and cultural sphere that has radically modified the common sense conceptions of time and space in the last 2 decades by contemporary writers. Where is it coming from? According to me, the geographical mobility of capital with investments placed on urban spaces, especially in metropolis and 2-3 tier cities in India, and we are talking about Maharashtra, has intensified the demographic mobility of industrial societies in contemporary time. The alienated, migrating worker of modernity further metamorphoses into his postmodern counterpart, who is taking along his family and is fragmented by the loss of sense of place and community. People are now faced with the dissolution of the traditional support system formerly provided by the extended bigger families, which is detectable in literature of modern as well as postmodern, what you call contemporary fiction. The weakening of the sense of belonging to a place and its people and temporal scales constantly on the move has made the individual disoriented for time, and temporally it has accelerated. But that doesn't mean that Prashant's novel is totally disconnected from the reality, but it is, to use his own story title, it's a dvij. He says it's a dvij, which is twice born. Reality and fiction is twice born. Especially his novel is the movement inside and outside time and space. As you know, the novel, I'm sure some of you might have read, those who understand Marathi, read Marathi. The novel, in short, is the story of a character called Sonkule and other characters, Sonkule, along with other characters, who are, this novel is also dealing with one person's formative development, formative years of one person called Sonkule. So he lives in some urban space for education. He has migrated there. He has shifted to the city for education, but interestingly, his urge hasn't been careerist in the novel. In that sense, novel is un-middle class novel. The trigger point in the novel, what I found, is the narrative point. The narrative point in this novel, which is I call trigger point, is to meet and leave. Or there is also trigger point in the novel, which is about human arrival, and it's a departure from time and space of an individual or people. So in this novel, people come and they go, they stay, they talk, they go, they stay, they talk, they go, they stay, they build relation with the time and space, they go. The reality is not projected as a typical postmodern novel. You might have imagined now, visualize, oh, this is very fragmented. It's not that. It doesn't mix what you call, it doesn't try to mix historical data with fleeting memories and fiction. It doesn't manipulate space and time. But it reveals general interest in culture in a short time span. And novel does it very subtly. There is a term that has been used in this novel, which is, and which I use. It says it's Akash Chaukas Kholi. So I don't know how to, I'll just try to translate it. Akash Chaukas, Akash is a sky, Chaukas is a curious, Kholi is Kholi, Kholi. But not like Kholi. So I envy his playfulness with the language. It's actually linguistic, also it's philosophical, because Kholi, its meaning in English is depth. But also Marathi word Kholi is not about just space, it's also about depth. So Kholi, it's a space and depth. So you know, he is a professor of philosophy. So what doesn't happen in novel? What are the issues for me in novel? So in novel, narrative time often focuses on moment of a present. So basically you'll read, a character comes in, lives in the present moment, kind of experiences the space and time and then leaves. But how the novel does it at the expense of larger temporal developments. The moment is not envisioned as a self-identical instant of presence, but as a partaking in an indefinite number of different and sometimes mutually exclusive temporalities. As a reader, I feel I am not given required time, required extended access in the wider cultural context of the event and the characters involved, or I am being trapped in the playfulness of the language. A scene in a novel opens up to exhaustingly different possibilities and versions of an individual self and space, making it increasingly difficult for me to grasp them in the view of a variety of moments gone by. The fact that different sequences contradict, highlight, or complement one another are embedded in intricate and sometimes logically impossible structure in the absence of any given pattern. Of course, they appear as a series of slices in Sonkule characters' life that correspond to each other. So I imagine when I read a novel, I imagine them writing letters to each other. But I, postman, I imagine myself also postman, but not reading them. So that is a kind of confusion that I get into while reading the novel. However, this does not mean that time is stuck into space or characterization is unrelatable. It's not that characters are unstable and are struggling for autonomy to seize control of processes that surround him or her. So that way it's not typical, what you call postmodern fragmented novel. Now, His characters are drawn from different stratas of society. They are not only one caste or classes. And for me, what is interesting about this novel, that they are not burdened to determine, I am not under burden to determine the social identities and classes these characters carry. This novel seems to be emphasizing narrative dimension instead, and this is my last point. Narrative dimension instead. Just quickly, to give an example of Kant's theory of fine art, and there is a very fascinating concept of aesthetic ideas in Kant's one of the theory. In Kant's views, it is aesthetic ideas that impart spirit to a poem. Now I'll apply same thing for novel. Kant defines an aesthetic idea as, I quote Kant, by an aesthetic idea I mean a presentation of the imagination which prompts much thought but to which no determinate thought whatsoever concept can be adequate, so that no language can express it completely and allow us to grasp it. And that's what he calls, it's because it's not replaceable. That's what he meant. So they are by nature aesthetic ideas, they are by nature thought-provoking. In a poem that cannot be reduced to a determinate thought or concept, hence cannot be fully captured by another set of words. And that's a good poem all about. So you cannot capture a good poem in another word or another set of words. That is the aesthetic idea that a good poem exhibits do not permit us to reduce it into, let alone be replaced it by a paraphrase. So paraphrasing of a good poem is not possible. That's what Kant says. Summary of a good poem is not possible. Thus, it's about insubstitutability of a good poem. I would like to replicate it by claiming for insubstitutability of a narrative that Prashant is exploring. In this regard, Prashant is a new voice. This is a kind of aberration for the literary culture that's obsessed with drawing conclusions, believing in stereotypical social processes, and following linear progression. I am calling it aberration because we need to wait for the body of his work before drawing any conclusion. Body of his work that builds on and extends from what he calls the Akash Chaukas Kholi narrative. Because this is his first novel, so we have to wait. I wish Prashant best for his writing, and also I express my gratitude to Shivani Center for giving me this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Ashutosh, for that insightful talk. Would it be okay if you took a couple of questions from the audience in case the audience had any comments, clarifications? Sure, maybe towards the end. Okay, all right. Could I now invite Professor Chinmay and Professor Prashant for a panel discussion, which we call as Exploring the Mind of an Author.
So we were just saying that the way Ashutosh was speaking, and there was a certain trance to the speech that you had. That had he not come having written his speech, maybe it would have really, we would have loved that it would have continued further. So taking some cues from what you said and what I personally find fascinating about Prashant's writing. About, and particularly about this Maharashtra State Award that his novel has won. To begin from there, in a way, is I wonder when a state or a government uh, gives an award, it's always trying to uh, tell its people or itself, uh, it's, it's trying to convey something. So when I look at this, that what is that Maharashtra state or the committee which thought over this, what is it trying to convey to the society through this award, is really what is novel about novel. So novel is a word that's for novelty and for the otherness, which Ashutosh what just was saying. Uh, it, it's about what is that otherness that this novel is offering to Marathi literary space in general. And mm, to me, what really fascinates is language that he is using. I'm happy to share that he recently read a short story of his at Sahitya Academy, New Delhi, and I translated that into Hindi. Now, the reason I tell that over here is, and that begins a certain question and a conversation thereafter, is that when I was asked to translate that into Hindi, as you can guess, it would have been really tough, and it was indeed tough. And that reminded me of Walter Benjamin's essay where he talks about its task of translator, and where he says that translation is a mode of intention. Now, interestingly, having listened to what Ashutosh was saying, and while I translated his short story, I felt like not just translation, but language itself is a certain mode of intention. And that mode of intending is being negotiated when Prashant writes Marathi. Now, in what ways is he negotiating, intending, is focused on, I feel, more on language, though Ashutosh also said about narrative and a certain uh, linearity of the chronology of the events. So, basic question that I have to you is that when we look at modernity of our literatures and also a certain sense of modernism in our literatures, Indian literatures, particularly also in Marathi, what I find at present lacking, and which also Ashutosh's presentation just underscored, was uh, that renewing our language and the linguistic narrative part of it. So in the beginning, you also compared that to play and uh, the larger space that novel offers as against play. It's about if natak is drushyatmak as it is generally understood, where the visual component is foregrounded. What I find is that Prashant's writing are more shabdatmak, and the way those words, the verbal the way the verbal plays across your writing. I find there is some kind of a new kind of modernism that's there. So, uh, what I want us to discuss over here is is what kind of linguistic modernism, a literary modernism based in language, in its Shabdatmakata, uh, is one question. And when, so that's one. And to connect something to that, is that I was talking to a critic in Marathi, and I'm not sure in what way he was saying, but he said that Prashant writes language. Now, if at all one may feel that there is a sense of perhaps a sarcasm, perhaps a disapproval in that, I find that a very interesting remark in itself. So, writing literature versus writing language, and taking language that seriously and putting it as a certain uh, uh, an element of otherness in one's expression. I want to I want you to respond on what kind of conscious choice it has been to foreground language in this way.
Very hard questions. And I wished, like Chinmay, that Ashutosh just goes on and praises me. And Chinmay, using all his scholarship arsenal, also praises how I write language. I mean, what can be a greater compliment than that I write language? And okay, let me try. So when you say that narrative or novel is Shabdatmak, I mean, that's obvious, that's a commonplace. Novel is written in language. But Chinmay means something different by that, I think. That novel is Shabdatmak or narrative is Shabdatmak means that the writer is trying to lay bare the Shabdatmak potential of Shabd or language. So language has got the potential to name things, to describe things, to interrogate things, to reconstruct things or deconstruct things. So that potential of words or language, a writer as if observes from a distance and let it emerge through the narrative, through the story, through the dialogues of characters. So, I mean, language is at the same time ours. It's very familiar. You have a good command over it, very smooth command over it, that you tend to forget it. You tend to forget its existence or your use of it. But at the same time, it's also something alien. Using language is trespassing, as J.M. Coetzee says in one of his letters to Paul Auster. That you are scared when you use words, as if you are confronting a system which is not yours. You are confronting it, you are a stranger to it. So I think it happens, and I like to let it happen in my fiction, that I want to exploit, in a good sense, and also witness the Shabdatmak potential of Shabd in both senses, that as a familiar force and as an unfamiliar alien force. And it's not only language, it's also narrative. So narrative strategies of various sorts also have got that potential. So it's a mix of narrative and language and their potential, I think. So if that's a modernistic tendency in my fiction, then I think I would characterize it from a distance, of course, as a thinker, not as an involved writer in that way.
Linking it to the narrative part of it, let me share what I find fascinating about novel and other short stories that he writes. Uh, Let us, in the very opening of the novel, there is, there are more than 2 paragraphs about how the sunlight, the daylight is diffused uh, on a bus. So the protagonist gets onto the bus, and there is a description on of the sunlight getting diffused and the way uh, so this investment into describing the diffused sunlight could be one, or there are other instances where the one that I translated into Hindi, it's about just investing into describing the space in its various details. It's not like offering an exhaustive detail of a space or of light or anything, but it's about foregrounding, as you were saying, about the, uh, it brings out a certain attitude of the narrative, of the characters. So this linking, like as though what I look forward to when I read his short stories or novels is that where is that point where uh, language is going to renew itself. So uh, on the one hand, I see these instances where mm, it's where there is a conscious effort of bringing in uh, that part of narration where not what happens or what is there, but how language can convey that. So mm, I want to ask you about what is that which is, in what way it's a conscious, or if it's not conscious, in what way you link language to the descriptions, and these are unique descriptions of certain sort. So for example, it could be light, it could be prahar, so particularly the way afternoons are described in his novel. I have not seen that kind of description of afternoons anywhere. So what is this kind, what is this engagement with space, with light, with afternoon? Um,
Okay, I think I'm allowed to praise myself. One reader recently described uh, about afternoon that Prashant Bagar should be given the patent of bringing afternoon in fiction and celebrating it. Abhishek Dhangar, who is a bookseller and book lover basically. So yeah, uh, I think uh, well, there is no cause to it. It's very. I mean, I think that when you describe things, I mean, it's always well worth asking what is description, or what is it to describe a thing or an object or a little happening. What do? You use what you know about that sort of event. So you use all words and terms and concepts that you already know and describe. So that would be like telling what happened to someone else. So maybe you want to go beyond that, and you want to see what's happening, maybe by removing the screen of those words and concepts that you already have. So then that becomes very much sensuous engagement with light or space or even a tree. And that's erotic in a sense. You are meeting with the world, and if I'm allowed to say that, you mate with the world. So that's very erotic. And so that erotic encounter lends that immediacy and that light to descriptions. So I think so language becomes a kind of erotic force there. And you see afternoon or a tree or a lawn or the taste of a pickle. So I think I'm very good at these sensuous, deeply sensuous descriptions, because I want to stumble upon my model of description. I mean, rather models of description, not just one model. I mean, if I follow it, then I would be defeated on the front of what Chinmay is praising as my modernism. Yeah. So yeah, so it's erotic, and it's and it's ever new description, and the puzzlement over description that I think pushes me to describe things in those ways.
Uh, uh, I also see that at once it becomes a poetic prose, and there come moments where the whole idea of categorizing literary narratives as poetry and prose, though these categories collapse. And as you were saying that a poem should not mean but be. I often find that while translating what you write, it becomes like, of course, as every translator would feel, that you are doing injustice to the poetic part of it, because that being of the poem which is there in that novel or that short story is failing when I'm trying to bring it in. So the the poetic part of uh, of this whole writing, that suddenly it elevates to the level of poem, and then the prose gets suspended, and you feel like, at least I feel like, this is the point that I was waiting for. And often in his short stories, the recent one, not the 2010 one, uh, but I find this one, Sat Goshtinza Pustak, which is one of his recent short story collections. Those
2010 stories are not poetic?
I find suddenly it becomes poetic, and therefore I find it's way more challenging to even translate. So that that compromise, that any translation of his writing is going to be a certain compromise, which is true for other translations too, but particularly for these, because the way poetry uh, constantly negotiates language in such a way that it rinses, it washes off the existing meanings that words have carried so far. And even like, look at the adverbs that he uses in his novel. Like I was baffled with this to shitafine daru karto. Sonkule has forgotten his keys, and he goes back to the room, and in the narrative, the adverb comes shitafine. Now, shitafi generally is used in Marathi when you are doing something clandestine, when it's a, but still, and consistently across the novel, there are more than 4 or 5 instances of the way in which shitafi itself is used. So, and you often do that with words. It's not just changing the meaning or using it with a certain in a new way. And it's not just about a couple of words. That happens a lot. And that's also another aspect which I would find while translating a challenge. So, is what kind of conscious effort is there behind that? Or what kind of, is that a strategy? How do you do? I mean,
Yeah, I mean, I feel happy when you notice the use of Shitafi, or when Ashutosh once asked about what is Surwad. So there is a description that the protagonist enters a room and there is a Surwad Ujed. So Surwad is an archaic word which means profuse light, so much light, plenitude of light. So what I think is that when I browse through dictionaries of Marathi, we use very little resources. I mean, there are so many words which are there waiting for us to use them. And Marathi, I mean, like any other language, is a complete and self-sufficient system. And it allows you to say so many things. So even there are compound words. If you break them and you use component words in some slightly different contexts, they begin to acquire new and fresh meanings. But we don't do that. We always use those compounds. For example, Tredha Tirpit. I mean, we often use that word as Tredha Tirpit. But I mean, see, you use only Tirpit. I mean, they both mean kind of same thing, but if you use Tirpit and then you have some alliterative flourish or something like that, it acquires wholly new, fresh meaning. I think there is so much untapped, there is so much unused, there is so much waiting in dictionary, not only in dictionaries, in spoken speech. I mean, just this afternoon I was telling Chinmay that Pune people use so many English words in their sentences. I mean, they don't use it in English senses. They have Puneri Marathi senses, like emergency or something like that. So it's not an English word, emergency, or rather, it's not English rather, it's something different. But people in small towns of Maharashtra, they use even newspaper language very comfortably and very smoothly and very expertly. But we don't allow that language to enter our discourses of whatever sort. So, yeah, I mean, many times I think these use of archaic words or breaking compound words or using newspaper language as it would be found in semi-urban areas, that I think I do consciously. But I mean, in the flow of writing, many things just happen spontaneously, without any planning. Yeah.
That reminds me of that word departure. So the way we have Jalachar and Bhuchar for terrestrials and aquatic, Prashant uses this word departure. And Dupar is afternoon in Marathi. And it's an interesting, and it also comes, the novel comes with a bookmark, and there are these two lines. So it's an interesting word in itself. So is it that you have a stock of such words?
I just coined in the flow of writing. So yeah, his departure. He wanders, he walks in the afternoon, so his departure. I mean, nothing can be more natural than that.
Yeah.
But it's my coinage.
Yeah. So about this rinsing or the washing and renewing language, how do you see, Ashutosh, about the Marathi word that I have in my mind is खंगाळणे. भाषा खंगाळून काढते त्याची कादंबरी. So
actually, can I ask very simple question, because I want to understand now. Like afternoon, you were telling like Prachi is your first reader. So my question to you is that what if when she says I didn't understand this? So what do you do with it? Because see, sometimes I also struggle to find the meaning of words. So who do you write them for? Who do you create them for? Like, do you create them for very niche reader? Meaning I call myself niche reader because I can access dictionaries and all. But then as a writer, who do you write for? Especially who do you coin these words for? I have some other question, but I'll ask you after you respond to this.
No, I mean, using dictionary words or archaic words is not for niche reader. I mean, no, everybody can understand it. When you are a Marathi speaker, when you are a speaker of a language, you have got the capacity when you have acquired the language, you have got the capacity to understand, to sense at least the meaning of that word, to place it in a context. So on that basis alone, I can coin words or use words. So it's never for niche readers. It's never for someone who has only technical specialization in some area. No, it's for everybody. And the readers who have engaged with novel and who have found its language beautiful are not niche readers. I mean, they are students, they are in different professions. They're not academics alone. So,
Yeah, actually, what I find yeah, I agree. I just wanted to provoke you a little bit, so that so what I find about is this key. There is attempt of not coining words, but as you also rightly said, there is a attempt of presenting something from sensuous point of view, not from just language. So I think you also believe in the reader's capacity to understand that sensuousness of um language. So actually, I also say that one is sensuous about language. One is not trying to elevate language to poetry, and I actually don't like to give uh, poetry as a higher form of expression. That kind of giving some value to poetry. Oh, okay, now this prose is become a poem. So it's higher. It's not a higher form. I think. Um I think what I so also the thing is that it's not poetry. I mean, not just sensuousness. Poetry is also about construction. So I think what you are trying to do in your novel is that you want to create dialogic space with your imagined reader, who is able to understand, who is interested in understanding the sensuous quality of your world. So um, rather than what I'll say, like you play with words, I think you play with construction, not like words per se. Constructing those words in a sentence form or non-sentence form. So I don't think calling something something which is non-sentence form is a poem. So something that is in non-sentence form cannot be called poem. It might have some poetic quality, but that doesn't mean that prose doesn't have that kind of power of elevating a reader. Prose also carries that what you call uh, power of creating sensuous effect or even philosophical effect within a text. Yeah, you want to say something like that?
I think the distinction should not be between prose and poetry. The distinction should be between prose and verse. So there is verse which can be metrical or whatever way we want to define it. And prose is something that is non-metrical. Uh, but both prose and verse can have poetic quality. I mean, we want a description of that poetic quality. One description can be, as you were explicating using Kant, that if it's insubstitutable expression, then it's poetic. Aristotle would uh, say that if it is mimetic, then it's poetic. So Aristotle explicitly gives the example of a writer on medicine and uh, a user of hexameter or some metrical form. So both are using the same form of verse, but both are not poets. Only, uh, say, someone like Homer is a poet because their writing exhibits mimetic quality. So we need some account of, so maybe that form and content are one, or it's insubstitutable expression that comes uh, closer to our intuitive experience of the quality of that language.
So are you also a visual artist?
No,
Do you paint?
no.
Because the idea of Drushyatmakta, so I think it's not also play or novel. Like what I find in your descriptions is that there is a Drushyatmakta too. Like that comes in a different ways, that comes in a different sense of light and shadow. So sometimes I wonder, how do you see something, or like you sense something and then you put it in your words? Like, do you see some visuals? Like for example, when I write a play, I actually see it happen. Meaning, if I don't see it, I can't write. So what happens with your narrative? Like, what is the urge? And also, how do you get into, like, you sit and, okay, there is light, there is sunlight, and then you want to start. I know this is very like a representational thing, but I would like to provoke you from that, because I also want to get answers.
I think, I mean, we need to get rid of the idea of non-linguistic experience or non-linguistic encounter with the world. So you see things through language. So when you strive, when you struggle with language, you are striving to see more. So, and they are two sides of the same coin. They are connected. It's not that first you see something and then you find words. It's happening at the same time. You are seeing.
Your language comes while you are experiencing it.
Yes.
But then it would have come, like, you would have created a painting had you been a painter.
I don't know. No.
No, I'm just because, see, the thing is that you have a language, like you can't get, like, because when you say non-linguistic,
You are inclined towards painting because we are talking about seeing. But if I hear something,
you also see it. You also, when you hear something, when I hear something, I also see it that way.
maybe in the case of a painter, there is a language, but language of a different sort. So language of colors or forms. So through them, they struggle to see more, or they struggle to describe it. But there is no independent seeing. There is no independent object that is seen, which is there. The object is shaped through seeing.
So in a way, you don't look at language as a representational form.
No, yeah. Strictly speaking, yeah.
But then my question is, so this whole thing comes in your non writer's life too. Like for example, you are some point non-writer.
Many times.
Yeah. So then, do you use that language while? I mean, use that language. It's very odd. Use of language is very odd. Like I'm feeling very odd. Like, do you use that language because your whole premise is based in the fact that I don't use language separately. It just comes. That's what you are saying. So when you talk, like in a mundane life, like everyday life, so do you also attempt of using certain novel-like sentences while talking to rickshawala, or like talking to prachi, or talking with your students? So I'm just wondering, how do you, because you cannot just sit for novel writing and, okay, I'm writing novel, because you are like very organically connected with the language. So like a walking, talking, you are writing.
Walking, talking, yeah. uh, yeah, I mean, many sentences or words come when I'm talking to Prachi. Later, I note them down. Yeah, it happens. I mean, even in mundane conversations, it happens.
So you go on describing rain like way you describe it in novel. Like for example, there is a passage I wrote down in my notebook. So he describes rain like, different forms of rain. बारिश की different forms है. Like how it, because then starting with the rain and then.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I was talking about that very passage yesterday with Chinmay, and it's that the protagonist is sitting in his room and watching the rain. The rain starts. There is a sudden shower. There is kind of it gets intense. Then there is sound of water. Water flows. There is a puddle, uh, and it gets soily. It moves, it makes circles. So I counted the verbs today. There are 50. So there is a long sentence in which I use 50 verbs for the rainwater. But it's not a list, it's an experience. So the protagonist starts to witness the rain and gets, it's also a self-transformation. It's also about his mood. So you see through the progression of those verbs, the transformation of his mood. And towards the end, there are verbs, santhavta and shanthavta. So it's a soothing experience, soothing mood that's created by the rushing rainwater. So it's at the same time, yeah, it's a festival of rain shower, and it's also a festival of verbs. Yeah, I counted them. There are 50 verbs. So 50 verb sentence I've written. Yeah, that's an achievement, I think.
And then how do you do that? Like you do exercises like.
No. It just came in the flow of writing.
Your novel, what is published now, is the first draft.
No, I would not say that. But I haven't done much editing or much changes later on. I mean, as I compose, I do some changes, but it just comes, yeah. But it's not first draft. That would be too much.
You imagine that experience or just look at rain and then start writing? No, because I'm really finding it interesting because someone like me who has been writing plays and also of course poetry. So how does it happen? Like because what you are making is very different point where you say that the experience goes with language, and this is like fascinating point. But then
No, it's purely imaginary.
So, something to connect to that is about, we were talking about experience, like the sensory experience. So it's not just about the taste or other five sensory experiences that we have, but it's also about the perception. So for example, in Lalbagh there is, or even in novel, that same philosophical point comes, where it's about the oldness of the world, whereas the character or or an individual goes, say, to a historical monument or even to some place with the idea of, I am visiting something old, archaic, and I really want to be fascinated with this one. But the things and places are where they are. Now, as a point, or even other experiences. So, I think many of your readers have also reported this on Facebook, not just about this, but if you could share somewhere the sensory experiences of these individuals or these descriptions which suddenly become philosophical, but still people could relate to that. I think that's an interesting uh, point in your writing, that many people relate to that because of the sensory experiences and also some philosophical problematization of experiences in general.
Uh, I don't recall now.
एखाद्या स्थळाला तुम्ही भेट देता आणि त्याच्यावरती जुनेपणाचा आरोप करता. So this point comes in a couple of
Yes,
places.
yes.
In novel also it comes somewhere.
Yes.
Also in Lalbagh and also in another story.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and this is just an instance. The point is, people have reported to you on Facebook. Maybe a couple of months ago, I was reading somebody's comment on that. So, I mean, that's also one of the interesting points in which
You tell that. I mean, I'm not able to recall that particular thing.
So my point is that putting sensory experiences in one's writing is also one way of associating with the world, and readers also associate with writers. and I have seen, while I have read your writing, I could do that. And I have also seen some people, some of your readers reporting that to you on Facebook.
Many readers have reported about the descriptions of afternoon, as we were talking about it. Even, yeah, one reader had very beautifully and lyrically talked about the gentle quietness of introspections of the protagonist. So the protagonist talks a lot to himself. So he has more conversations with himself than with others. And there is, in the background of those self conversations, there is a gentle quietude, as that reader expressed it. So, and that's not intellectual. I mean, the reader is reporting here that sensuous experience.
So I remember something what Pamuk wrote in his essays. It's about someone comes to him and says, Mr. Pamuk, I know you so well. I have read all of your novels. So, I mean, the sensory experience that a writer puts in his writing is such that you feel that you now know the person. You don't know the person personally, but still you feel that the personal sensory experiences have been given to you through these literary writings. One last point, what you were talking about painting and novel. Uh, Madgulkar, Venkatesh Madgulkar was asked this question by Ravi Mukul and several others in their letters, that he began his career as a someone who's drew sketches for his living and then shifted to literature. So are you uh, an artist at heart or a writer? So his response was that I found that sketching would not have conveyed what my literary writings did. As against when Pamuk reflects over his career, he feels that he came to literature as a compromise. So just the exact opposites of that. So, so I mean, I just wanted to share that. It's not that, but
I would like to know more about writer. So very like, how do you spend your day? Like because those who are writing novels and especially stories, they're very like they have to write a lot. So how like you keep on writing every day and then you realize, oh, this is going to be novel now. So how did it happen?
It's very hard. No, I go to office, I teach, I have meetings with my PhD students, and I have meetings. I'm also convener of finance committee. so, so, yeah, very much mundane and good life. Yeah, I quarrel with Prachi. So yeah, very mundane life.
So in between two classes, philosophy classes, do you get some kind? Oh, now like thank you. This class is not happening today, so I should sit and write something.
No. That day it will not happen, definitely. I mean, you get idle. You are right. I mean, so, no. I mean to say, ki, when do you write? I mean, when, not exactly temporally. Yeah. I like to scribble. So I make notes in handwritten notes or soft notes. Uh, Sometimes there are passages. Passages are especially important. They can turn into thoughts or a beat of a narrative. But yeah, I mean, one should write every day, ideally, but I can't do that. But yeah, when you are in full flow, I've read somewhere, many writers say that. If you manage to write 600 words, that's very mathematical and computational. But if you manage to write 600 words when you are in flow, that's very good. Yeah, yeah.
Actually, I know, have you heard of this Neil Gaiman? He's a very popular writer. And I hear him a lot, because you are supposed to respond. So Neil Gaiman says that he keeps on writing, and he says this key every writer should write at least few words before he goes to sleep. So his whole thing is that when he was writing 2-3 novels simultaneously, I'm sure you don't do that, but he will keep a notebook near his bed, and then रात को सोने के पहले कुछ भी हो जाए, he will write 300 words, and then he finished novel. So what I'm trying to, he was a professional writer that way, fully dedicated. But how does your teaching and how does your researching help you being a writer? I won't ask does it, I'm sure it does, because you have already written a novel and then number of stories. But then I would like to know, because there is also philosophical bend in your writing, and you teach philosophy, and there are also your students. So I would like to know, how does it go hand in hand?
Yeah. So my writing is philosophical, or it has a philosophical bent. I know what you mean, but I generally don't like that. No, it's more than philosophical. My writing is more than philosophical. Philosophy is intellectual. It's methodical. My teaching of philosophy helps me in that it sharpens my thinking. But just that, sharpened thinking doesn't enable one to write fresh fiction. Sources are somewhere else, I think. So, in a way, philosophy can also be, what you say, disenabler also. So, maybe sometimes challenge is to go beyond philosophy. Yeah, I would like that. That's a happy description.
And then how long you took to write novel?
Very long. 2.5 years at least.
Oh, it's not very long.
Yeah, I know.
Because it's a novel.
Yeah. 2.5 years at least. 3 years maybe.
And so you write during summer breaks.
Yeah.
My experience with teaching is, and as I also shared with Muthu and you, is that after you teach, you get a phenomenal relief and you feel like krutakritya. Everything is done now. So if you write after a class, then that should be described despite having a great class, despite having a phenomenal relief that comes after having taught an hour-long class, being able to do anything.
You can't do anything.
Yeah.
When you have to give a lecture, that's a high point of your day. So you prepare. Yeah. In melancholic mood. Yeah. So it's a high point of your day. It's the climax. So once you are there, you only go down.
Yeah.
So you can't write then. So because you have invested yourself in that lecture. When you have delivered it, you are nothing. You are utterly exhausted.
So I have been avoiding asking questions the way you were asking about what time do you write, when do you write. So
I have one more and then I'll stop asking, because he's a teacher and he has been teaching for a long time. It's not like so what do you like most as a writer? What do you like reading? Do you like reading assignments, or you like talking to them on some philosophical idea? What does it mean, meaning from writer's point of view? Because sometimes when I do assignments with students, especially in creative writing course, I really enjoy reading them, and also they feed me into my kind of some of the idea, trigger some ideas. So your conversations with them or your assessment of their writing trigger you to write some of the ideas, because there is some interconnection. The way, because you are living, like for example, we all of us live how many hours, like 10, 12 hours, actual physical hours we spend at the campus, and remaining few hours, most of time we sleep or we fight, argue, talk. So, so this is my last question about this. How do you relate yourself with your profession, with your reading of your students' assignment, talking to them? Do they trigger you, right?
Yes, I think, I mean, what I enjoy the most is giving a lecture. I mean, I prepare a lot for it, and there come moments when I'm giving a lecture when I see some unforeseen connections or some unpreconceived phrasing that I utter there spontaneously. I mean, there are moments of discovery, moments of delight, uh, unplanned, and very imaginative moments. That's the most enjoyable and most triggering part of the profession, I think. Besides reading, of course, reading so many books. I mean, potentially, in principle.
So just a closing comment, because not all Indian languages have this genre called Lalit. We in Marathi and Kannada, and recently in Hindi, they have come up with this Lalit, which is a philosophical, literary writing, which has which has philosophical reflections based on one's everyday living. So I think that also feeds into writers in Marathi and Kannada to go in that direction. But recently I was told that not many languages have this kind of a genre called Lalit. These are essays, goes close to what Persian has called Insha writing, but Insha has more of article oriented writings or essay oriented, whereas Lalit writings or Lalit essays are not just philosophical, they are literary with a mix of personal experiences and the personal sensory experiences as well. So, so I think there is a lot of Lalit also that comes in our writings in Kannada, Marathi, and maybe a bit of
Meditational quality,
yeah.
it has, yeah.
So
You
yeah,
want to ask your teacher question, teacher, writer? Because otherwise you won't get opportunity.
Thank you so much, Prashant, Ashutosh, and Chinmay, for the wonderful interaction and gave us a lot to think about. I would like to invite Kedar Techolkar for a cultural performance.
Okay. A very good evening to everyone present here. I'm Kedar Decholkar. I'm a PhD student from the Department of Design, IIT Kanpur. And it's a pleasure to perform today. I thank Dr. Ark to invite me. Shivani Center. Also, congratulations to Dr. Bhagat for Professor Bhagat for his felicitation. Welcome to Poddar sir and Dharukar sir. Okay, so after people of such high stature have spoken, the pressure is immense. So since the days is at my command now, I shall begin. Okay. So before I start, I have a short prayer in the immortal words of Guru Thakur. First of all, can I have a rough count of how many know Marathi, just tentatively? Okay, a sizable number. Okay, so I'll speak in Hindi, English, Marathi. I'll mix it up together. Okay. So, आज्ञा हो तो शुरू करें. So as Guru Thakur says, रसिक हो दे दंग, चढू दे रंग आज खेळाला. साता जन्माची देवा पुण्याई, लागू दे आज पणाला. हात जोडतो आज आम्हाला, लाभू दे आज तुझा संग. The meaning being that, O Mighty, O Almighty, may the audience be enthralled. रसिक हो दे दंग, चढू दे रंग आज खेळाला. So may this meager pauper's tricks and plays entertain you. साता जन्माची देवा पुण्याई, लागू ते आज पणाला. May all the goodwill and good fortune that I've had in my past lives come to fruition today. And with my folded palms I say, O Almighty, please be around me. Please be with me today so that I may entertain the Rasika sitting today. So my first track, many consider it to be a Bal Geet, a kid song or a nursery rhyme sorts of, but it has a very significant meaning for me, and I think for everyone here today. The thing is that we usually see ourselves as inefficient or insufficient. We do not have enough to give to someone else, in terms of whatever it may be. But that is not the case. We are much more than what it seems. We may not realize it, but we may not realize it now, but eventually there will be a moment when you do. So, presenting a beautiful arrangement by Sudhir Phadke. No, sorry, my bad. Yeah. A beautiful arrangement by Srinivas Khare, and the words are by Gadi Madgurkar. Eka तळ्यात होती बदके पिले सुरेख, होते कुरूप वेडे पिल्लू तयात एक. It's the inspiration is from a poem named Ugly Duckling by Hans Christian Andersen, who was a Danish author. So I shall begin. एका तळ्यात होती बदके पिले सुरेख, होते कुरूप वेडे पिल्लू तयात एक एका तळ्यात होती बदके पिले सुरेख होते कुरूप वेडे पिल्लू तयात एक कोणी न त्याच घेई खेळावयास संगे कोणी न त्याच घेई खेळावयास संगे सर्वाहुनी निराळे ते वेगळे तरंगे दाऊनी बोट त्याला दाऊनी बोट त्याला म्हणती हसून लोक आहे कुरूप वेडे पिल्लू तयात पिल्लास दुःख भारी भोळे रडे स्वताशी भावंडना विचारी सांगेल ते कुणाशी सांगेल ते कुणाशी जेते तयास टोची धावी उगाच घात आहे कुरूप वेडे पिल्लू तयात एक एके दिनी परंतु पिल्लास त्या कळाले एके दिनी परंतु पिल्लास त्या कळाले भयवीड पार त्याचे वाऱ्यास वे उडाले पाण्यात पाहताना पाण्यात पाहताना चोरून या क्षणैक त्याचे त्या कळाले तो राजहंस एक एका तळ्यात होती बदके पिले सुरेख होते कुरूप वेडे पिल्लू तयात Thank you so much. The next song. This is probably the song which got me interested in music. This song has such an intimate connection. Like it has a very close, closeted space in my heart. It's an old song. I thought ki performing such songs need a certain audience of class and understanding. So I feel I couldn't have got a better audience than today's. So yeah. I think ki anyone who understands Marathi or understands the lyrics in general, especially the students who are present here today, would relate, would feel the pain in the song. There's a very interesting story about this. Again, this is a Gadi Madgurkar writing. So this was created for a movie named Jivhara. So when Gadi Madgurkar wrote this and again gave it to Srinivas Khare, he saw the lyrics, and the moment he saw the lyrics, he decided कि ये गाना अगर कोई गाएगा तो लता दीदी ही गाएंगे और कोई नहीं गा सकता. So Khare Kaka went to Lata Didi just to tell कि I have this particular song particularly just for you in my mind. Lata Didi, and this was the period where Lata Didi was on the pinnacle of her success. So she said कि मेरा schedule बहुत tight है, like 1.5 months my dates are booked, पर नहीं हो पाएगा. But after a lot of insistence, Khare Kaka like told her to sing the song. And once the song was recorded and once the song reached the audience, it became a timeless classic. So, presenting before you, Ya Chimnyanno Parata Phirare. Ya Chimnyanno Parata Phirare. या चिमण्यानो परत फिरारे घराकडे आपुल्या झाल्या तिन्ही सांजा झाल्या तिन्ही सांजा झाल्या या चिमण्यानो परत फिरारे या चिमण्यानो परत फिरारे घराकडे आपुल्या झाल्या तिन्ही सांजा झाल्या दहा दिशांनीला अंधारा नापूर दहा दिशांनीला अंधारा नापूर अशा रे आई पासून दूर चुक चुक करीते पाल उगाच चिंता मज लागला या चिमण्यानो परत फिरारे या चिमण्यानो परत फिरारे घराकडे आपुल्या झाल्या तिन्ही सांजा झाल्या आवती भावती असल्या वाचून कोलाहल तुमचा आवती भावती असल्या वाचून कोलाहल तुमचा पूरकन तो आमचा कधीही कामाचा या बाळानो या रे लवकर वाटा अंधारला या चिमण्यानो परत फिरा रे या चिमण्यानो परत फिरा रे घराकडे आपुल्या झाल्या तिन्ही सांजा झाल्या The second last song of today's evening is a abhanga. An abhanga is a composition written by a saint, a sant. So this is, and the reason why I've chosen this song again is this song, the contribution of sants or saints is very important for us. As we had a discussion today amongst us, such discussions back in those days also were held, but just amongst a very elite circles of discussion, like literate, educated people. People like Sant Eknath Dhaneshwar Maharaj have taken it to the common audience, common people, through the form of abhanga, bharud geet, whatever. So, presenting another song, the music arrangement of this song has been rearranged by me as a small effort. Presenting before you Rupe Sundara Savarage Mai by Sant Eknath Maharaj. Original composition by Sridhar Phadke, the son of Srinivas Phadke. Sorry, son of Sudhir Phadke. रूपे सुंदर सावळागे माये सावळागे माये रूपे सुंदर सावळागे माये सावळागे माये वेणु वाजवी वृंदावना वेणु वाजवी वृंदावना वृंदावना गोधने चारिता है सावळागे माये रूपे सुंदर सावळागे माये सावळागे माये ऋण झुण 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 वाजवी वेणू ऋण झुण ऋण झुण ऋण झुण ऋण झुण वाजवी वेणू विधी वेधले विधी वेधले आमुचे तनु मनु माये सावळागे माये रूपे सुंदर सावळागे माये सावळागे माये हाती घेऊन काठी गोधनी तारी हाती घेऊन काठी वैकुंठीचा सुकुमार वैकुंठीचा सुकुमार गोपवेशे जगजेठी वैकुंठीचा सुकुमार गोधनी चारिताये सावळागे माये रूपे सुंदर सावळागे माये सावळागे माये Thank you so much. And for the last song of the evening, I'm going for an evergreen classic. Won't talk much about this song. Presenting before you a short excerpt of the, like a full song and a short excerpt of two songs from the drama Katyar Karzat Ghusli. Presenting before you Surat Piya Kine Chhin Bisaray. सूरत पिया किन छिन बिसराए सूरत पिया किन छिन बिसराए हर हर दम उनकी याद आए हर हर दम उनकी याद आए सूरत पिया किन छिन बिसराए 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 सूरत पिया किन छिन समाये नैनन और नैन दो समाये तरपात हूँ बिलखत रैन निभाए तरपात हूँ बिलखत रैन निभाए नैन निभाए नैन निभाए अखियाँ निरसुवन जरलाए अखियाँ निरसुवन जरलाए सूरत पिया किन छिन बिसराए सूरत पिया किन साजन बिन मोहि कछु ना साजन बिगड़ी को मेरे कौन बनाए बिगड़ी को मेरे कौन बनाए बिगड़ी को मेरे बिगड़ी को मेरे बिगड़ी को मेरे बिगड़ी को मेरे कौन बनाए हसन रागा सुजी बहलावे हसन रागा सुजी बहलावे सूरत पिया किन छिन बिसराए सूरत पिया किन छिन बिसराए हर हर दम उनकी याद आए हर हर दम उनकी याद आए सूरत पिया किन सूरत पिया किन सूरत पिया मकरंद गे गे छंद मकरंद प्रिय मिलंद मकरंद प्रिय मिलंद मकरंद प्रिय मिलंद मधु सेवना नंद स्वच्छंद धूंद गे Thank you so much for bearing with me for so long. Thank you and have a good night.
Could I request Professor Ark to felicitate our performer with a bouquet for his wonderful renditions? Yeah, we are just left with vote of thanks, but I'll just take a quick moment and request all of you to sort of give a round of applause to Ark also, uh, because this event, as some of us would know, happened in spite of all odds, with so many probable, worries. But he sort of pushed through and held all of us together and made it happen. So thanks once again. And over to Ark for vote of thanks.
Thank you, Sushruth. I think it was his inspiration and he sort of did most of the thing. So again, I would like to thank all of the audience. I'd like to thank Professor Ashutosh for being here, Professor Prashant and Professor Chinmay. And thank you for a lovely evening. I personally learned a lot of things about writing, about fiction, and it was a very fitting, closure to such a nice event with the lovely voice of Kedar. And Kedar just agreed to come and perform at the last minute, as most things happen with me. So it was, thankfully, it all turned out well. I hope you all had a good evening with, Marathi literature and music. And we hope to be doing this maybe more times than, we can admit at this point. Okay, thank you so much.